Good afternoon, Professor Shastri. It's a pleasure having you with us. The topic that we wanted to be enlightened on is corruption in public life. As you know that for the last few months and maybe years, this has become a sort of a big problem and more so affecting the youth as to what kind of a future they have in a country which is so much bogged down with these kind of problems. I have a few questions and I thought I'd start off by asking you, that has the corruption in public life gone up, or was it always there and maybe not reported? And therefore the impression that we are having is that, suddenly things have gone out of control. Because when we were kids, we were also used to hear that, you had to pay some money to get things done. But it was not that, it didn't become that much of a talking point which it has today.
Yeah, certainly I think the exposure in the media about issues of corruption has really increased a lot. Along with that, what you hear privately probably has also increased. I don't think anybody really knows whether it has gone up or not. But one thing is very clear, and that is, even if the number of scams may or may not have gone up, the amount of money involved is really mind-boggling. Yeah,
that is true.
So the government fell on a scam of 64 crores.
Yes.
Back in 1984,
That's right.
89.
That's right.
But even if you adjust for inflation, that kind of a scam today nobody will even look at it.
Yes.
It has to be 150,000 crores, 250,000 crores.
True.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is something wrong with India and us Indians, or is it a phenomenon of any developing country that goes through a phase of this heightened corruption and then things level out and society develops and becomes more mature? What is the experience? Do you think that the Western countries have been sort of spared this
Not
thing?
at all. You see, they used to call it the California Gold Rush, where everybody was heading west. But that became a metaphor for the amount of money individuals or companies could make. And there were huge scams in the railroads and various other public investments, where in the US lots of individuals and corporations made huge amounts of money in the oil industry, in the railroad industry, and so on. So it is nothing new. It has happened in every country. But I am not satisfied with that. I don't think just because it happened in other countries we should say that so what. I think we need to solve our problem and not worry about what happened in other countries.
How do you think we should solve this problem? I mean, are we moving in the right direction with all this talk about the Lokpal? But it's very frustrating that after a whole lot of activity that came up, it actually it came to naught at the very end. The results were for all to see. So are we progressing in the right direction, or will it take the normal time? Is there any hope for improvement in the next few years, few months?
See, it's like this, it's very hard to predict. You have this wall and you are trying to break it open and bring in the pure waters of cleanliness and freedom and whatever from the other side. Now, how thick is that wall? When exactly is it going to crack? We don't know. Is it going to take the next 5 hours or the next 5 days? But sometime it will. So that's what I expect, that all these movements, whether it's India Against Corruption or several other efforts that I've also been associated with, somewhere something has to give. But I don't think anybody can put a time to it.
The tendency has been that there has been a focus on government, and whichever government it is, it could be ruling power or power that was before or whatever, but the government seems to be the parent of the whole exercise. Do you think it's fair? I mean, are people who are involved in other sections of society not equally responsible for making a society the way it is? Do they have a sense of responsibility? I mean, they say that the bribe giver is probably spared, but the bribe taker is punished. But in the last quite a few years, Do you think that people who have been in business and contributing in business, they are equally to be blamed for at least taking on the responsibility of reducing the level of these bad practices?
I think some sections of the business community need to be held accountable. It's very difficult to say that all businesses are corrupt, just like it's difficult to say that everybody in the government is corrupt. I think the big push to big money and big scams has really come from the inclusion of the private sector in very large projects, what we normally call the PPP, the public-private partnership.
Yes.
And if you look at 4 of the recent big scams, starting with the smallest one, which is the Commonwealth Games, where large amounts of contracts were given to private companies to set up those stadiums and so on. Then followed, of course, by the 2G scam, which was a complete public-private partnership between the government and the private sector, if one may say so. Then followed by the CAG indictment on the Krishna Godavari basin, where they raised doubts about how the oil and gas is being handled, and now the most recent, which is the Colgate scam. So all of them involve public resources being handed over to the private sector. And as Joseph Stiglitz and Paul Krugman, at least 2 of the American Nobel laureates of economics, have said that when you are privatizing public resources, large chunks of it at one go, there is a huge incentive to undervalue those resources and hand it over to the private sector, because what is left over can go as kickbacks to various people in power in the government. So between the private sector which indulges in this and the government which also indulges in this, there's a win-win. Unfortunately, in this win-win, the public is the one which seems to be suffering. Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is this impact of corruption in the country. We've been all huge figures have been often quoted, and related to that is the amount of money that has been allegedly stashed outside the country. Do you think that that has got any substance in terms of is there a possibility of it coming back in realistic terms, or is there such a khajana which is there in the Swiss banks, which every political party makes capital out of the fact that we should bring it back and we should try and bring it back, and the amounts are huge. But is it at all feasible to even think of bringing that back? Are there not controls on the other government side that you can't do this because there is some confidentiality involved there? So is it a sort of a white sort of elephant are we chasing on this stash of foreign exchange abroad, or is there a possibility that it can never come back?
You see, I am not an expert on Swiss bank money that is stashed away. Since you asked for my opinion, and I may be way off the mark, I feel that given the situation in the country, for every small grain of truth, there are lots of conspiracy theories, and we are eager to believe the worst. So if 1,000 crores is stashed away, we would rather say it is 100,000 crores. So my opinion is that some money is definitely stashed away. Now, what is that exact amount? It depends on who is casting aspersions on that. About whether we can get it back or not, the US has arm twisted the Swiss banks to release data. So, if we are really serious, we can get that information. The problem is we don't want to solve the problem of corruption. When I say we, I mean as a society. There are individuals and citizens who are keen, but as a society, if we wanted to, we can do it. Nothing prevents us.
But then why is our society like this? Are we underdeveloped compared to the other countries, or is it a natural process of evolution? Because I was talking to another senior professor of sociology, and he was telling me that there's nothing to get too upset about this. It takes a normal course of evolution. For example, the guillotine was, a common place thing in France before the revolution, but today it's completely unacceptable. So, is it that because we were developing, or our starting point of development was much later, that it will take its own cycle of development and finally we will emerge as being much more enlightened, and therefore our society will be itself more punishing on its people who default? Because can you superimpose these standards from outside and bring them into the country, or will it be a process of natural evolution that will make us much more enlightened?
Yeah, I think, if you look at broad sweeps of history, we can go on, saying that, well, everything works out in the long run. Mm-hmm. We were a great civilization 1,000 years ago, and we'll again become a great civilization. And I think it's good to have that perspective, but we are living here and now. And I think even when those upheavals took place in whatever countries, there were people who were concerned about it. There were people who were concerned that someone was being guillotined. So there are people who are concerned about corruption today. As a professor of sociology or whatever, I can take a very benign view and say, well, these things happen and we don't have to get worried. But even at that time, when those things happened in other countries, people were concerned, and people are concerned about it today. And I think the Indian genius is how to find solutions for today's problems. And I don't like that implication of your question that we are imposing some Western norms, or that we are, I don't think so. I think this is a huge scam. It has nothing to do with Western values. I'm really sorry that you felt obliged to ask this question. This is not an imposition of foreign values or foreign norms. Such kind of scams are not acceptable in our country or any other country, and we got to make sure that they don't happen again. And we, meaning we, the citizens of India. There's nobody else is going to do that.
Sure. No, what I meant was, it's not the superimposition of Western scam, but any code of conduct that you have in a society, or you have in
you have to find our own solutions, whatever it is.
But the commonplace is that you take a code of conduct which is outside the country, and then you sort of Indianize it and you put it here. That's what happens in many corporates. You're suggesting that this is not the right way. We have
to think and do. We should learn from everybody and look at our situation and find the best solution, and I think we can find them, frankly.
No, the only suggestion is that it's taken us a long time and at great cost.
Correct.
And a poor country or a developing country like ours can hardly afford that cost.
All the more reason why we should do things quickly rather than go back to the sociologists and say, well, these things happen and they will all correct themselves.
What is the solution, sir? What is your message to the younger people who are waiting to be very
well, for those who want to do something, I can only say that the tough get going when the going gets tough. So it's time that the few chosen people, they have to choose themselves, nobody's there, and say that this is a crisis and we're going to do something about it. But that's going to be a small proportion. Mm-hmm. The majority are not going to take that view. Mm-hmm. I think for the rest of them, I would say that instead of taking an activist role, start with yourself and make sure that you yourself are clean and honest. And particularly since we are in an educational institution, I think we don't expect that our students are going to become necessarily anti-corruption crusaders. If they want to, God bless them. But they will be occupying high and responsible positions when they are working in the corporate sector, both in India and overseas. And they should make sure that the decisions they take, the actions they take are ethically sound. They do not indulge in obvious things like bribing governments or anybody else, and also that the decisions that they make do not adversely affect local communities or the environment. Because in Europe, there are huge, all over the world, there are huge movements where the corporates have got together and gone way beyond CSR. CSR is just doing some good around the villages that your plant has come up, but they're saying that these are the ethical standards. We will not pollute the environment, we will not harm the communities that we are working in, and we will not bribe the governments, and we will actually create a better situation wherever we operate as a business. So I think those of our students who are going to occupy such high positions should make sure that in their individual capacity as very senior executives of top companies, they would follow those ethical practices.
So what you're suggesting is charity actually begins at home. So you start putting your house in order and doing things ethically, and automatically everything else will follow.
As an individual who doesn't want to be an activist, I think that's the best I would do. But if I want to be an activist and I want to participate more vigorously in this, The field is open. I mean, we saw what the India Against Corruption achieved or did not achieve, but we need lots more people. And this is the when I say when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Rather than leaving these things to people who are, I mean, all said and done, many of our students are of very high caliber.
Sure, of course.
And so are our faculty actually, or anybody in the corporate sector at senior positions. If they take a lead,
We can change things.
because they have the credibility, they have the contacts, they have the resources, they have access to high positions both in the government and in the industry bodies, and when they take up a cause, they have enormous credibility. So that kind of responsible leadership, or I would even call it responsible activism. See, Mahatma Gandhi made activism respectable at that time because of the way he functioned. We need someone like that in the corporate sector who will make this kind of activism respectable, and then you will see that magic will happen. Someone in a very high and responsible position who says that I stand for this and I am going to support activities that will root out corruption in this country, it will make a big difference. So we are waiting for that tough guy.
Some of our corporate members can see this video and be inspired by this. There was some suggestion from some quarters some time back that it may be a good idea, and I'm not advocating this, and I personally don't agree with this, but there is a point of view that says if we legitimize certain activities, for example, there was a hue and cry about this betting in cricket matches. But then somebody said, but it is completely legal in the UK. So once you legalize it, then there is no sort of profiteering to be made by doing something illegal.
Correct.
So similarly, if there are so-called services rendered, quote unquote, services rendered by some people, and which may expedite things to happen. If you go back to the history of corruption, it is basically the bakshish that is given by the colonial master to something that happened out of turn or something that happened so-called efficiently. Now that privilege of bakshish got translated into a right. So every Diwali, every Dasera, every Christmas, there is a certain expectation from these people who want things to be given so that certain services can be rendered. Can there be some kind of a legalistic kind of legitimizing this, which might bring or expedite or make things happen?
See, I haven't thought about it, but if we are talking about using taxpayers' money or public resources, which could mean oil, gas, etc. And if those public resources or taxpayers' money, which is also public resources, is going to be used to fatten either the corporate sector or individuals or politicians in the government, I don't see how we can say that by legitimizing it, it is going to be, it's all right. But if there are intellectual services or consultancy services or actual services that somebody is providing and somebody is willing to pay for it, I think it's okay. But ultimately it's always the test of common sense.
Yes.
The older we get, the more as we reach adulthood, our minds get adulterated. So I would say, if you ask a 10-year-old kid, do you think this is right? And if he or she says, yeah, it sounds okay, then it's fine. But if the kid says, no, this is not okay, then I would say it's not okay. Because what is the message we are giving to the next generation? That this is okay, that is okay, everything is okay, then what kind of a society are we going to build? We have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the next generation.
No, I completely agree with you. I was just referring to this so-called this Tatkal system that is coming. You want something done in a hurry, you officially pay double the price, and you'll get your passport in time, you'll get your gas connection in time, you'll get everything in time.
I don't think that's corruption, because you see, this is a value-added service that the government is providing. One can argue on different grounds whether it should be done or not, but purely in terms of the test that I put, that money is not going into any individual's pocket. It is going into the government kitty, and if you want quick service, the person is paying for it. I don't see any ethical or corrupt issue on that. Of course, the larger issue remains, why do you need that and why can't everybody get quick services and all, but that's a separate issue.
I have one last question, is that, deterrent is a big, weapon against many of the wrongdoings. And that brings me to the fact that a court case in India takes years and years and years. So much so that there is no fear in the minds of the person who is transgressing the law into any problem. So,
Correct.
And therefore, if it's going to take another 20 years or 30 years, a person is out of bail,
Correct.
then where is the justice or the law of the land taking shape?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. As they say, justice delayed is justice denied. So we certainly need to expedite some of these cases. But there is one more issue there. You see, when we have such a situation, there is a lot of concern that we should have strong deterrents. But if you look at society, I still believe, maybe I don't know what percentage. I'm just 10% maybe, congenitally corrupt and power hungry and are willing to fatten themselves at the expense of whatever the society or the government. And there might be another 10% on the other side. No matter what, they will always be honest and straight. But there's an 80% in the middle which swings this way, that way, depending on the situation. But right now, the mood seems to be deterrent. So while we need to have deterrents, I think we also need to create a positive, healthy environment or a atmosphere where good, honest people feel that they are valuable, that they can get ahead in life by being honest and capable and hardworking, and they will gain the respect of society, and rather than being penalized, they're actually going to be rewarded and respected for that. So there is a responsibility on us as a society to create that kind of an environment also. So I think that is more of a societal issue than a legal issue. And I think when it's a societal issue, we as citizens have to make that happen. So for example, while we may continuously criticize the government whenever it goes wrong, I think we should also appreciate the government when it does something right. Or somebody for example, I think the Election Commission does a very fine job. I think today, I'm sure I'm making a controversial statement, the CAG is doing a fantastic job.
Sure.
As citizens, we should appreciate what the CAG and the Election Commission is doing, and that is a mutually enforcing thing, because they're working for us, and we by supporting and recognizing them, they also feel, well, it's not that we are only fighting corrupt forces somewhere in the government or in the corporate sector. There's a huge public which is supporting us. So I think that kind of a environment where we appreciate honest people, tough people who get things done, people who are capable, people who do not succumb to temptation, that kind of an atmosphere in this country needs to be recreated. I think it was there, and we need to recreate it. It was certainly there at the time of independence. So
yes, I know things have gone wrong since then. It seems that
I always remember this, they say कि वो हिंदी में गाना है कि ये धरती है बलिदान की, वंदे मातरम. I think that spirit, maybe not like the heady days of independence, but in a maybe milder form, that spirit is required today. That ye dharti hai balidan ki means we appreciate that. Like we appreciated Gandhi or Bhagat Singh or Sardar Patel or Subhash Bose, and there's a whole galaxy of them, Rajaji and so on. We need to appreciate the people who are really sticking their neck out and fighting, whether it is Anna Hazare or Vinod Rai or the Chief Election Commissioner of India, or not only in the government but in civil society.
But that's not happening the way it should as yet. The momentum is there, but it loses steam. I mean, you mentioned Anna Hazare. I mean, we know that there was a huge amount of support, and at least, everybody was in one frame of mind that this is a fantastic thing he's doing. It's a fantastic thing he's doing. But due to various reasons, whether it is their own management or because of the public, or rather the political maneuvering or whatever happened, the public appreciation should have been far greater than what actually happened.
No, actually, here I will steal a book from your sociologist friend. Even if you go back to, when you talk about history, if you go back to the independence movement, Gandhi took 32 years after returning from South Africa to get independence. And before Gandhi came, there were several leaders. You know, you had Dadabhai Naoroji, and you had Gopal Krishna Gokhale and Tilak, and I'm sorry if I missed many names, but there were so many great. So they had laid a platform, and then Gandhi came and he took it forward, and it took him another 32 years. And I'm sure they faced many failures. Gandhi himself, you know, non-cooperation movement, 1933 failed. His salt march, while it created, you know, nothing really came out of this. They didn't even repeal the salt law. So it doesn't matter. I think they have done a great job, and I think they're laying a platform, and I am sure either they themselves or other people will take it forward. Because they have done one thing. They have shown for the first time since 1947 that it is indeed possible for people to hold the government accountable, even if very briefly. And that the government has to respond to public pressure.
Yes, that's true.
That was never demonstrated so clearly thus far. So I think that's a step forward.
Fantastic. I have one unrelated, related but not part of corruption question, and we'll end the interview after that. Is that, you know, organizations and companies have a code of conduct. And that code of conduct is sacred, and it's very clearly told to an aspiring manager that everything else is fine, you will be progressing depending on your performance. But if there is a break in the code of conduct, you cease and you lose your job. Now, even God gives you a second chance of redeeming yourself when you go to the temple and you say, you've done enough. But I have yet to come across a single company, corporate company, or maybe even in the government, where a person who is being, admittedly, he is found guilty of a misdemeanor or a violation of the code of conduct, he has been summarily sacked. Most organizations, they say that there is no second chance, you are sacked. Do you feel that there is an opportunity to relook at that, and codes of conduct should be to take into account that after the person has been suitably punished, there is a possibility that he could get his reputation back into society? Because I have checked this with a whole lot of companies, they said there is no way that if there is a violation of a code of conduct, you leave, the person leaves. Now, why I am asking is this is because then people cover up these violations and they still remain because nobody can prove it. But if it is very clear that, look, I know that, under Islamic law, when I was in the Middle East, once the term is over in jail, your balance is 0-0. You start off afresh. But in our society, it is very difficult for a person who has got into some kind of a jam and got into some kind of a code of conduct violation to rehabilitate him. And a lot of young people are involved in this, and their entire future gets ruined because of either being misled or being irresponsible at a point of time. After all, they're human. But I have yet to come across a single organization which has got a plan which says that, okay, fine, you've made this mistake, you'll suffer for it, you'll lose your promotions for the next 5 years, 3 years, but there is life ahead for you.
Yeah, I think as a principle, my personal view is that people should be given a chance, second chance. Why second chance? If you go to the Bible, he says that how many times I should forgive? 7 times, and he says 7 unto 70 times. So that means you should forgive forever. I think the only thing we should be careful about is that while a person's dignity should get restored and a person should get the chance to get back, the society for its own protection needs to make sure that this person never has a chance to cause damage to society. See, there is individual vice. For example, somebody is an alcoholic. Now, it's a problem, he's destroying himself and he definitely causes anguish to his immediate family members and relatives. But it is still, but if I do something, devastate the environment and I dig up iron ore and, cause pollution in the air and the water wells become red and all that, and then I have caused problems to others. So even if I am rehabilitated, I should never be allowed to do mining again.
Sure.
So whenever you are rehabilitating a person, you say, well, you can go and live a dignified life and all, but you will never be allowed to do that mischief that you did last time. I think that principle should be there, because otherwise lots of innocent people suffer.
Absolutely.
So we cannot allow somebody a chance of being rehabilitated so that he can continue to cause damage on innocent. So, but he can lead a normal life. I have no objection to that.
Thank you very much, Professor Sastry. It's been really enlightening to hear you.
Thank you.
I hope more and more people listen to this, because this really is the most important subject that is being discussed at various forums, and nobody has an answer to this. But as you said, that you quoted the Bible, it's like sinner heal thyself. Let's heal ourselves first to start doing the right thing in our own lives, and perhaps set an example. But it requires a lot of courage. I'm sure you agree with that. It requires a lot of courage to do things in absolutely straight path. And
We also need a leader who will bite the bullet and show the way. If somebody who is from the establishment and not somebody from outside the establishment. See, Anna Hazare is outside the establishment. We just need one or two people who are strongly pro-establishment to bite the bullet and say that I stand for this and I will not tolerate anything else, not only in my company, but I don't want to see this happening in my country or in my industry association or in my government. Then the magic will happen. It's not only a question of, see, that kind of extraordinary leadership will definitely turn things around. You see that a little bit in other countries, but we are not yet seeing it here.
yes, I know, we see that in other countries, and in fact, I hope that, as you said, Ye Dharti Hai Balidan Ki, that sort of that spirit seizes all the youngsters of this young people of this country, and it sort of bridges the gap that we have in terms of development with the others. And Mera Bharat Mahan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.